Searching for local businesses in Northwest Arkansas just got easier. From restaurants to roofers, boutiques to baristas, FindItNWA.com connects you to the best local businesses with just one click. Discover something local, something great. Visit FindItNWA.com today. Find it fast, find it local, FindItNWA.com.
It's time for another episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas, the podcast covering the intersection of business, culture, entrepreneurship, and life in general here in the Ozarks. Whether you are considering a move to this area or trying to learn more about the place you call home, we've got something special for you. Here's our host, Randy Wilburn.
Hey folks, and welcome back to another episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas. I'm sitting here in the Furman Garner Performance Studio at KUAF, and I'm excited today because I'm actually sitting with an individual that's actually become a good friend of mine and someone that I really admire for the work that he's doing here in Northwest Arkansas. And I was so excited when he landed the job as general manager of KUAF. And so without further ado, I want to welcome Clint Schaff to the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast. Clint, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Randy. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, listen, man, I'm honored to have you on this podcast. And as we were talking before I hit record, I was saying that there's a lot of potential in the area of media and new media. And so I'm really excited for you being here at KUAF and adding just some fresh blood and some fresh insight into an area that honestly has been under fire. There have been challenges for public radio across the country. And I think somebody like yourself with your background, which we're about to get into, I think it's exciting to see what is possible. And so without further ado, I would love for you to just share with our audience a little bit about who Clint Schaff is. And as we like to say, give us a little bit of your superhero origin story.
Happily. Thanks again for having me. I'm Clint Schaff. I live here. I live in Bentonville, work here at KUAF, which it's a listener-supported service of the University of Arkansas School of Journalism and the Fulbright College of Arts and Sciences. And we're a public radio station. We're an NPR affiliate and this year, 2025, we celebrate 40 years as an NPR affiliate, which is a cool milestone. For me, my journey with media began as a kid living in rural North Dakota in a small town called Mandan. My siblings were all 10 to 15 years older than me, same parents. And I was alone a lot growing up in this rural town. And two things happened to me about 40 years ago. I drew a picture of a robot and it got printed in the funny papers of the Bismarck Tribune, the paper record for the state of North Dakota. And we would come to town from our rural community to buy groceries. People say, "Hey, Clint, I saw your robot in the paper." And I say, wow, that felt really good. Made me feel not alone. And most of my career has been chasing that feeling of having my robot seen ever since. And then in more recent years, or most of my career has been about helping other people have their robot seen, whether that be marketing, advertising, or storytelling, or working at media organizations like the LA Times and now KUAF. And then in more recent years, it's been also from a values perspective, making sure that no one perpetually doesn't ever see their robot seen. Like there are lots of different types of individuals, rural Arkansans, people from different backgrounds who don't always see themselves in media. I want to make sure that everyone at least sees someone like themselves, if not themselves, in the content. The other thing that happened to me that same year was I made a hip hop album with my cousin, John Pizzo. We were called the Wolverines. And the best lyric we had was, "The car I own is a Ferrari. It also has a built-in Atari." That was a good bar for a little kid. And we were known all over town for like our little rap duo. And then and now, I kind of use my love for hip hop music as a connective tissue to hang out with people and to bring a little quirk to our relationship. And so I actually first got introduced to KUF via my hip hop radio show, Hip Hop Hello, which I also still have on Bentonville Community Radio at KOBD up there at 103.3. And then the KUF picked up the show. And after the station and the university must have liked my background and brought me in as a GM. So for me, to connect those stories, I've always viewed media as an antidote to loneliness and isolation. I experienced those feelings as a kid with older siblings who was alone a lot in a rural community. It's a different type of media that brought me together with people, But nowadays, and in the last 20 years, social media has been a place people have found a lot of community. We've also seen some downsides to that form of community, but most things have pros and cons. And I really am in this job, and I view the responsibility. My superpower, to answer your question directly, is the ability to use media and content experiences to bring people together for a shared sense of understanding and hopefully a positive dialogue.
Yeah. No, I love that. And as you were speaking about that, I've always considered KUAF to be a beacon of not just information, but also hope for those that are living in rural parts of the area. I mean, I think when I first did an episode on KUAF several years ago with Kyle, we were talking about the amount of wattage that came from the antenna and how far it could reach. And, I've talked to people down like Russellville that can get KUAF's audio. And so I think it's interesting that, sometimes we think, oh, well, it's just for this area here in Northwest Arkansas, but it reaches further. And that's the thing about terrestrial radio. It reaches further than you think it reaches.
Yeah. Thanks to the listener support and the support of University of Arkansas, we have strong wattage, great towers. We pay for those. We have a lot of fixed costs tied to that. And we are able to reach something like 15, 16 counties of Arkansas, plus several counties in eastern Oklahoma and southwestern Missouri. And so I really feel like we are, in many ways, the connective tissue of the region. You mentioned Kyle. You were referencing, of course, Kyle Kellums, our longtime beloved host of Ozarks at Large. He's celebrating 35 years this week of hosting that program. And Kyle really sets the tone for what we do at KUAF, but it's more than him as well. We really, over those 35 years, over the 51 years of the station, having a news organization with the gravitas and ethics and rules of an NPR, with the support and the relationships with the university, the flagship university of the state, we have a really good pulse of what's happening and what's been happening over many decades in Northwest Arkansas and the surrounding areas. And not just what happens with the championship basketball team or the giant, largest company in the world and their IPO and all those great stories, but also just the human stories of the region.
And there are a lot of those.
Yeah. The person in Jasper, the person in Eureka Springs, the person in Centerton, the newcomers from the coast that are coming here for work opportunities. And we have it all through Ozarks at Large and throughout the day through spotlights like Community Spotlight. And we're doing really great work. It's something to really be proud of.
It is. And I certainly want to put a quick plug in there that anybody listening to this, if you've ever listened or tuned into KUAF, KUAF is listener supported. I just want to remind people of that, because as a kid growing up, I used to listen to our local NPR station in New York. And I remember listening to a station that my grandfather was on, the National Black Network. There were several, WBLS, there were just so many amazing stations, radio stations. And, when you think about this day and age in the importance of getting real good information, basically every NPR station stands above, head and shoulders above the norm when it comes to veracity and when it comes to just being a station that represents not just one interest, but all interests. And I think that's important to remind people. And that's why I have a sense of pride that we actually have an NPR station in the area or region that I live in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I can speak on that, the financial model, as well as some of the challenges and opportunities around that. First of all, maybe something worth knowing is that the difference between KUAF and NPR. NPR is its own organization. It's a nationwide public radio network that serves America, and stations earn the distinction, and then they pay for programming from NPR. KUAF existed before its affiliation with NPR for 11 years. In those situations, you either have local programming or you partner with, you find programming one way or another.
Yeah.
Music often, because it's more affordable to put on the air. We aren't creating a lot of programs. So if someone has a critique of an NPR program, that's valid, and we love to hear it, and we want to valid. We're always making programming and decisions are made locally, though. A show may be created in Washington, D.C. or L.A. or New York, or any place where there's a big public media audience. But we're making a decision on what to air here, and we take that really seriously, and we love feedback, critical, constructive, and otherwise. One of the best ways of feedback is with your dollar. Over 60% of our revenue comes from membership donations. We love contributing listeners, especially when they can commit on a monthly basis, even if it's a very small dollar number, because we can budget against that. Someone does $5 a month with us, we can bank on that $60 and make a decision on an expenditure. We also love one-time donations if that's your preference. And there's a big trend actually toward people donating from the IRAs and from retirement accounts and stuff like that. There's some tax benefits to doing it that way, apparently.
And actually leaving something from your estate to a radio station. It's not unheard of. And actually, we had somebody from the Arkansas Foundation, and she shared there's so many unique ways that you can give back to those organizations that you feel so strongly about. And I've talked to a lot of people here in Northwest Arkansas that esteem KUAF at a high level in terms of the value that it has brought over the years.
Yeah, I've been told that we're of all the departments of the University of Arkansas, we're one or number two in terms of the support and number of donors that we have. So we're definitely proud of earning that. So that's responsible for 60% of our revenue, more or less. Underwriting, which is a way of businesses and organizations sponsoring the content, and a great way to reach our high household income, highly influential, highly informed audience with messages that they're not advertisements, so they don't really beat you with the head with a big call to action. In fact, we can't have big calls to action.
Yeah.
And so we think those are really effective for businesses in the area. And then the remaining 20%, most of that, 16% of the overall budget, comes from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. And that funding is going to experience challenges. There's been conversation nationally about what public investments are to be made, and we elect people to make those decisions. And it's very possible that funding would be impacted. Walking around in March of this year, 2025, most people are like, how's it going over there at the public radio station, right? Because they know about that.
Sure.
And I'm not engaged in politics. We're in media, so I won't state an opinion on that. But I'll say my response often to a question like that is, KUF's doing as well as you're doing.
Right.
If you decide, and I actually, you asked if I still host a hip hop show. There's a hip hop song on the album Black on Both Sides by Mos Def. The first song, they say, hey, Mos, what you think about hip hop? How do you think it's doing right now? And he goes, well, I'll tell you what, if hip hop's smoked out, if you're smoked out, hip hop's will be smoked out. If you're doing all right, hip hop's doing all right. I feel that way about KUAF. If you're engaged in the community and you view the work that we do as beneficial to the community and worthy of your support, then we're going to be engaged and earning your support. If you're sitting it out, well, then we'll have to cut programming and we're going to have to make tough choices. We do have some budget shortfalls. That's not a very fun thing to talk about, but it's a real challenge in this year and will be in the next couple fiscals. But I'm laser focused on some kind of hopeful solutions to increase revenue in a real way that allow us to continue to offer everything we've been offering for 50 years.
Well, and I certainly I'm willing to beat that horse a little bit because I know how important the Corporation for Public Broadcasting is. But more importantly, I mean, again, public radio, it's just that it is public. I mean, you think of all the programming that does come across the wire, if you will. I mean, I think of like All Things Considered and Planet Money. And there's so many great programs that come through. And then the thing that, again, I get really prideful about is the fact that, we've had our own program, our own version of All Things Considered called Ozarks at Large, which has run, consistently for years. And I think people should recognize that. And I know some people say, oh, well, I don't listen to the radio anymore. I've had so many of my friends subscribe to the Ozarks at Large podcast because it's like, okay, well, then, yeah, you can time shift your listening habits. You may not have time at 12 noon or 7 p.m. or anything like that, but you can listen to it whenever you want to, on a run, feeding the dog, walking the dog, washing dishes. I mean, there's all kinds of options and opportunities. And, that brings me to this new point of, how new media has impacted, especially public radio. I mean, we could say the same thing for public television, but new media has impacted public radio. But I'd be curious to know, given your background and experience with the LA Times, and, you got your graduate degree at USC, a great institution. I'd be curious to know, what did you learn in your time in LA, especially working for the Times, that you would hope to bring here to Northwest Arkansas?
Yeah, I mean, a broad answer, and then I'll share a couple ideas of things I want to do here, is not to do what worked in one place in another place, because the situations are always different. You're operating from different strengths and you're operating with different limitations. At the LA Times, we were rich in great story and great reporting, and we were behind on non-text media storytelling. And so with support of the president of the LA Times, Chris Argenteri, and a young woman who worked with me, Camila Victoriano, who's now co-founder of Sonoro, a very successful podcast network. We did LA Times Studios. And so we partnered with outside production companies, Neon Hum Media, Wondery Media, to create podcasts. One of them became Dirty John, was a huge success, spawned off a television show, 2 seasons. That spawned off a whole studio that we offered. The studio won an Oscar in 2024 for Best Documentary Short for a project I helped bring in. We did a lot of great things with very minimal budget without any staff headcount. Well, here, we also probably don't have the ability to dramatically increase staff headcount. In fact, who knows if we'll be able to maintain all the heads we have. If we're going to grow and dimensionalize into other media that isn't terrestrial radio, we're going to need to figure out how to do it with volunteers, with vendors, with partners. And it's hard to do that within the confines of public radio and a state institution, but we're going to figure it out.
Yeah.
And so on-demand listening is where we need to be. We need to be in short-form video. We need to be in live events and experiences. I think especially, 5 years now out from COVID, there's still a hunger to get back to community with people. We live in divisive times, and there are things that can bring us all together, like music, like Ozarks at Large, and it's community-oriented work. Like Community Spotlight, where we highlight local nonprofits. We could have a live event around that. We think there's a lot in the event space. And all that's it's hard to do all those things at once. So we're actually starting with, we're in the middle of a Pointer Institute and CPB-funded digital transformation program. And we're actually starting with kind of an old school product, but we're looking to revamp our newsletter in a significant way. And really thinking about audience funnels and how do we grow, the opt-ins to the newsletter, how do we convert more of them into members, and really being focused on serving listeners. And one of the metrics of whether or not we're serving them is how much of that is being realized as them becoming contributing listeners. We just do really good work here every day. We don't have any days off. We broadcast, 72 hours every day because we actually have 3 stations. And there's not a lot of time to step back and strategize. So we need to optimize on the fly. And we're going to do that with a few digital products. And I also want to do it with the radio itself. Like how do we maximize the number of local voices that exist on the air, not only for our locally produced programs, but also during the breaks of the nationally syndicated shows that people love. Wouldn't it be cool if during a Terry Gross interview on Fresh Air with a newsmaker, we know the rundown maybe 24 hours in advance. Maybe we produce a locally relevant, a local story that's relevant to that topic of the national story during the break of that show.
Yeah.
That'd be really cool, right?
That would
or
be.
Get some customer feedback, or get some listener feedback and broadcast it on yesterday's show. Hey, yesterday you heard us talking about tariffs. Well, here's some local responses to the tariff issue, and we play it during the break of that same program the next day. I think that'd be really cool. And so I have a lot of ideas about how do we tap into the community. In summary, what's the biggest challenge we have is that the funding model means that we are hat in hand to the listeners who support us. The biggest opportunity we have, it's actually a strength of ours, that's our model, because we, unlike other commercial media, we have built-in feedback loops from our customer every single day. And so I want to lean into that challenge and really focus. We've always been really focused on the community. That's our whole reason for existence. I think we could even do better in terms of creating structures to listen to and prompt more ideas, genuine ideas, experimentation with the audiences we serve, and then measure them and see if they were working. More rapid iteration of what we're doing here. Public radio audiences are known for not wanting a lot of change. They hear like the same, the go-to show is on noon on Saturday. If you change that thing, we're going to hear from it. Well, I'm here to introduce a little bit more change, but controlled change, nothing chaotic. But I want to say, hey, we're hearing from a lot of folks that they want to hear the Freakonomics show that WNYC offers, and we don't offer it right now. Let's try to get it on the air. And that means something else might not be on the air for that period. So how do we do that? How do we optimize our music programming to really support the local music ecosystem and bring forth all the great music voices in this burgeoning creative capital? And so, yeah, I'm really excited to take it all on.
Well, yeah, no, I agree with everything that you just said. And I think it's a great idea to really kind of lean into that area of building a stronger email list. In the e-commerce world, the common phrase is you get rich with the list, right? And
Yeah.
and the reality is that a lot of people think, oh, well, email is kind of old school and long in the tooth, but it's not. People still check their emails.
Yeah.
People still get upset when they get spammed with stuff they don't really want.
Right.
But then when you do get things that you want, you're excited to read them. You're excited to engage with them. And so I would certainly encourage you. I think there's a lot that KUAF can offer on the email side of things to really keep listeners engaged and to introduce KUAF to a new generation of listeners, right? Because I know that, even as like Edison Research just came out and said that one of the fastest growing areas of podcast listeners is between the ages of 12 and 24. Question would be is how do you translate that into generating some more listeners for KUAF in that demographic? Because that would be huge.
Right.
And that's how you can kind of keep the process going. I listen to radio because I watched my grandfather listen to radio. Yeah. So, but then there's been a somewhat of a break in terms of mimicking and seeing other people do certain things. And so nowadays everybody's watching YouTube. So, I'm going to watch YouTube too, right? But maybe there's a place for KUAF there as well.
Absolutely.
And so, I think that to me, it's yes and as opposed to, well, we got to do this or we have to do that.
Yeah. And that's everything I would say as well. What's challenging is unlike a private startup that's operating on kind of funny money that they raise that they can burn through, is that we are like highly accountable to taxpayers and all that. And so, which is good, but it means that we can't go out and make investments and then hope that it'll work out. We actually have to be sustainable all the time. And so we're going to do that. And it's going to be a challenge. It'll be really exciting. And again, I think, for anyone listening, if you're a big KUAF listener and fan, we need you to get involved in a real way. There's a fundraising drive underway this month, so you can support us there at supportkuaf.com or by calling into the station. But beyond that, we need to do things like a community advisory board that has a representative sample of the whole population that we serve, including outside of Arkansas, maybe even including some listeners from out of state who listen, exclusively via podcast and stream. Have a kitchen cabinet, if you will. Our official board is always going to be the Board of Regents of the University of Arkansas. So this group wouldn't need to have binding authority or really, make the hard decisions because it's not their remit. But we need a sounding board. We need folks who are going to come in and, I don't know, if we start tabling at the 10 great music events a month, the 10 full-time staff here can't do all those, right? So we need folks who are going to put the KUAF jersey on, go out and represent for us the way that I did before I had this job.
Yeah.
And the way that, others do. We just need more of that. And I think people believe in what they themselves help create. And maybe we could do better about inviting more people to come in and create with us, literally and figuratively.
Yeah. And I think that's great. I mean, I have been a KUAF apologist. I'm a fanboy, have been for the longest time since I got here. Because and I think I told you this, but when I first moved here over a decade ago, one of the first things I did look for is, do we have an NPR station here? And when I saw we did, I was like, yes.
Yeah. So, and then with a show like Ozarks, it's like nothing really like it. When I first moved here, it's been just under 4 years. I mean, I shared the story yesterday at the celebration of Kyle's tenure here. I listen to Ozarks every day as a podcast, and I typically found myself emailing most of the newsmakers who were interviewed. So like I'd hear about whatever, probably my first exposure to Randy Wilburn was probably an appearance on Ozarks at Large. That's who I would figure out who to follow on social. It's who I'd figure out how to email about, who to follow, what websites to visit, was often prompted by Ozarks at Large. And I had the region pretty well wired and networked in a short time, in large part thanks to Ozarks at Large. And I think that show and this network does that for, the 40, 50 people who are moving here every day for a lot of us. And there's got to be a way to turn that into revenue, but it's also, I want to even do that better. I think just by providing better service, we're going to see the returns for the community. Maybe expanding on the idea I shared earlier, I don't have a name for this yet, but I'm really looking to create like a volunteer network of listeners throughout the 20-ish counties that we serve, where right now we've been doing these community coffees, as I think Randy. So we show up in Eureka or Berryville or Bentonville or Fayetteville or Springdale we should partner with a coffee shop. You can come get a free cup of joe and then give us some feedback on the station and how you feel about things. That's been great. I want to get to the point where we have somebody who wears a KUAF jersey as a volunteer in one of those communities, and they're hosting it without us. They're just we give them some discussion guides, maybe. Hey, here's some top stories from the last month as selected by listeners. And here's some questions that you could guided discussion. And we'd love to hear that feedback and air it like a true community station. And I think we can get there.
I do too.
Super excited about it. And one of the markers I have, my team, I don't know if they're on board with this yet because I haven't communicated to them, but like one of the markers would be how many and what percentage of the voices on the air are local voices. We're really proud of that syndicated national public radio content. It's excellent radio and certainly cost effective to the taxpayers of Arkansas, the taxpayers of America, to borrow a program that's created and pay than versus pay tons of money to create it in ourselves. That said, I'd love to have more local voices on the air. I love it. I love it if every hour you heard 3 people from 3 different counties saying who they are, something about the community, some reaction to a story, some original thought, or just a station ID revealing who they are and why they listen. I think I want to scale that up as much as we can.
Yeah, I think that's huge. I mean, I know I'm always blown away when people come up to me and say, hey, I just heard you on the radio. Yeah. And I'm just like, oh, I mean, since my affiliation with the station, which has been more than about a year and a half now, I think it's been really cool that people, you sometimes think, oh, well, nobody's really listening, but people really are listening.
Oh, yeah.
And it's more of a situation of putting an apparatus in place to kind of collect the feedback from those individuals. Because like you said, the feedback loop is important. And I think there are certainly with technology nowadays, there's so many different ways to be able to do that. But I got to attend one of the listening events at Red Kite Coffee up in Springdale. Shout out to Red Kite. It's a great coffee shop. But that was a really great experience. And there was a number of people that turned out for that event. And I was like, yeah, these need to be happening more often than not. And you're right. It would be hard to commit all of the resources internally that you have to that because you still got to run the station. But if we can get people that are local, that have a passion for public radio and also just want to give back in a way, then that would be certainly one way to do it. And I would challenge anybody listening to this particular podcast, if you think that's you need to reach out to Clint.
Yeah, hit me up.
And you need to reach out and we'll make sure all the information's in the show notes so you can connect with him directly. But I think that would just be one way for you to help support NPR. Because I always tell people, and more specifically KUAF, I tell people sometimes we don't have enough cash at the end of the day to give, but you have your time, you have your talent. And so there are other ways that you can give in addition to, helping to raise money. And I will say this, regardless of when this podcast episode comes out, we're recording this in May of 25, March of 25, but every month is a good month to give to public radio. So I would encourage you to seriously think about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a gym membership where I don't know about y'all. I'm a member of a gym. I pay a monthly fee. Some months I go.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay.
Well, this is a gym for your creative muscles, your connective muscles, your anti-loneliness and anti-isolation muscles. And, so put in $5 a month to be a part of the club, and you can come in and out as your time permits.
Yeah.
In a more meaningful way. But we reach a lot of people. You're making the point about, does anyone listen to this thing? Yeah, lots of people are listening. At any given time, there's at least 25,000 people listening, and often as many as 75,000. We have a potential listening audience of 750,000 in the region that we serve. These are real numbers, right? And it's all relative, right? Are those the same numbers? Is that as large as the LA Times region? Nope. But we're a smaller market. And so we're reaching a solid percentage of the people in the market. We're competitive with the commercial radio stations in the area. And we're not competing with them, but I'm saying we rank with them. And reaching a lot of people. As someone who's created podcasts in and out, some professionally and some, kind of underfunded versions of my own, it's hard to get audience. There are some really good podcasts that have, 80 monthly listeners. We don't have any shows that are getting 80 listeners. Like anything that gets on KUAF is reaching 5-figure audiences, 25,000 to 75,000 listeners. And that is significant for a voice to be heard.
Yeah.
And there are shows that we work with that nearly, if we did the math, 98% of their audience is through their appearance on Ozarks at Large, and very little of it is through their actual podcast. That's all right. Right. And so we want to continue to do that too. I think public radio is always trying to figure out how do you create more content that's representative of the community without dramatically having to scale up staffing. That's a challenge. And we haven't figured that out either. But I love the idea of there being some rural reporter voices in counties, on the least populated counties that we serve, but so that they pop up in the air more often than they do. We're unlikely to have a staff person that's going to couch out there. So they'll go out there for a major story. But one of the things I know about rural America, I grew up in rural America, is you don't only want when there's bad stuff. You don't want to just hear about the bad water or whatever. You want to hear about all the great people in the community.
Sure.
So we're going to have to get those stories from you all so that we can make sure that as many as 750,000 people in Northwest Arkansas, Arkansas River Valley, southwestern Missouri, and eastern Oklahoma have an opportunity to hear it.
Yeah. And I think half of it is just building it, right? And creating an opportunity for people to lean in and be like, oh, well, yeah, KUAF has that apparatus where you can actually call in and record a short story and they'll edit it and air it, when,
That's right.
under the People Talks program.
Right,
so,
right.
something like that. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of really creative ways I think that can do that. You have a background. You taught at the University of Southern Cal. You also taught at University of Arkansas in the journalism department. I remember coming and actually speaking to one of your classes, which was fun. What educational initiatives, if any, do you hope to implement or expand at KUAF to kind of foster, not just media literacy, and we talked about it a little bit, but community involvement?
Yeah.
From an educational standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we are not just have a relationship with the University of Arkansas. We are the University of Arkansas. Like I am a member. I'm a staff member. My email address is shoff@uark.edu. And so we are one and of the university. So we're by definition contributing to the land grant mission of the university of educating, Arkansans by providing high quality programming rooted in facts and in great storytelling. So there's that at the essence of who we are. Additionally, as part of the University of Arkansas and nested within the journalism school, we provide internships and other opportunities for students to work and train at the station. We are helping all kinds of majors, but a lot of journalism majors, prepare professional skills for their future careers. It turns out, actually, some of the best reporters at KOSU in Oklahoma and some of the stations are alums of this station. One of our interns from last semester, Rachel Sanchez-Smith, has a very prestigious job at WBUR in Boston now. We're kicking out some really great talent here. Shout out to
BUR is a great station.
Yeah. And she's all the time. And so that's, you can't carve rotten wood. So that means the state of Arkansas has some smart cookies and they're showing up in the university. And then some of them are ending up here at the University of Arkansas's flagship NPR station, KUAF. We're really proud of that. But like this semester, we have 4 great interns. They're not paid this semester. We'd love to pay, but we have a budget shortfall. So because they're not paid, I got to make sure it's an educational experience.
Sure.
So maybe half of their time is working in mentorship under a professional here at the station. Quarter of their time is working on an individual project, creating a flagship project that they can take with them as they progress their career, like the Eagle Scout, if you will, of radio. And then the other quarter is a shared learning experience. So I have speakers coming in and staff. And the truth is, these 4 interns, I'm hearing from staff who've been here for years saying, man, I didn't know how I've never been in the technical room. No one's ever given me an orientation.
Sure.
These interns are really getting the whole 360 look at everything that goes into a radio station. It's been very helpful for me too, being relatively new to radio. And I hope to scale that out more. We have some initiatives that are underfunded. One of them is podcasting. One of them is KUF Live Sessions, which is our answer to NPR Tiny Desk, where we host concerts. Every time we do one of these initiatives, if there's not revenue tied to it, it's costing us money and it's no revenue's coming in. That's not great. So I want to A, go out and try to find revenue and underwriting, but B, try to keep the costs low by employing as many students as possible and giving them a great portfolio project. So when we were interviewing a national touring band who's playing at the AMP or at George's, and we're going to do our version of a Tiny Desk called KUF Live Sessions, let's have students do all the production for it. Then they have that great clip that they can use as they seek further employment. And
it's a great resource addition to add to their resume. So
yeah. And it's a lot of fun that way.
Absolutely.
And it also gets to the point you're saying about how do we get more, people like under 50 to listen to public radio. Well, a good start is to have them work on the radio and hear themselves on there, right?
Yeah.
I think our NPR hosts actually are of varying ages. It certainly isn't like a seniors only situation, but we could always do better about making sure that young people hear their peers on the radio, not just as hosts, but also as the subjects of stories, and not just when things are not going great, but also the quirky stories of, individual newsmakers, people who are just doing notable things. Yeah. Whimsy, fun stories. You mentioned a study earlier. I recently had the opportunity to look at a great study from an organization called Greater Public. It's called the Researching Unmet Needs Study. And there were many great takeaways. One of them, the most concerning one, was something like 1 in 10 people are familiar with public radio. It's pretty concerning. The greatest and most exciting finding of the main 5 takeaways was that like 10 out of 10 people want what public radio is cooking. Like they're seeking fact-based information. They're seeking common content experience with their neighbors that isn't driven by an algorithm meant to incite them.
Yeah.
and that's been for all sides of the political spectrum, that comment. They want music that breaks up the difficulty of the news cycle. We offer that too. So when people are introduced to it, they're like, I want that. That sounds really cool, man. Someone should invent that and be like, it's been invented. We've been doing it for 51 years here.
Right.
And so I think we just have to do a better job of marketing it out there. It says something. We don't have a marketing lead, well, no wonder not everyone knows. The radio is our best place to market because we do have a substantial number of listeners. I guess all y'all listening to this, if you're a KUAF fan, you're now our new head of marketing because we need you to go out and tell more people about it and, evangelize on behalf of the station.
Jump on your Canva, create some story posts for them and share them out and tag KUAF in it. And so that's how you can certainly take advantage of it. So
I do that. Even before I knew you, before I was in this post, I'd hear an episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas that spoke to me, maybe taught me about part of the economy I wasn't familiar with or something like that. And I'd be sharing it not because we had a business relationship or anything. Maybe I'd met you or hardly knew you, but I thought the content was valuable for me and it might be valuable to others. So if you're finding value, if anyone listening is finding value in anything that KUAF does, share it with others so they can garner that value as well.
Well, I always say sharing is caring. So you've got to do that. Listen, I certainly want to ask you, and you alluded to it earlier, but where did your hardcore affinity for hip hop come from? Because you're a bigger hip hop head than even I am. And I grew up in that era. I mean, I remember Grandmaster Flash and I grew up right near the Sugar Hill Gang and I actually went to school with Master G's brother, Leo O'Brien, who actually passed away a few years ago. And he played the little brother in, what's the movie? The Last Dragon.
Wow.
He played the little brother of Timok, the guy that was the star of The Last Dragon. But anyway, it's a little connection there. But yeah, I mean, I knew Sylvia Rohn really well, and her sons and I used to hang out together. And Sylvia Rohn was part of Sugar Hill. She produced the Sugar Hill Gang. She's like the OG of that whole era. But I remember that, and that was like 1979. And I know I'm totally dating myself now, but you are more of a hip hop head than even I am because I haven't not had a reason to have a Mos Def reference on my podcast, but you gave me one now, and I love Mos Def, and so I'd be curious just to maybe expand upon what hip hop has meant to you.
I mean, sure. And by the way, there's plenty of people who are. It's not a competition. There's plenty. Of people who are
absolutely
fans
not. Absolutely
so I'm not puffing up like that, but I am. KRS-One. Maybe you haven't had KRS reference on here either. He says, I am hip hop. It's similar to the sentiment of the Mos Def quote is that if you feel like you're part of hip hop, you are. It's not. There's no giant on a hillside that is hip hop that you have to get endorsed by. And so, as a young person, that was a badge I picked up. A lot of people. I'm not alone in that. As a young person, especially as an adolescent, that you kind of define yourself through your musical choices. I just happened to grow up, luckily, in a time where there's a lot of really great hip hop, the mid '80s through the mid '90s. Couple golden eras in there.
That was a golden era.
Yeah. And then when I went to school in Minnesota, there happened to be a burgeoning hip hop scene there. An independent hip hop label called Rhymesayers was coming up. A group called Atmosphere. They had artists like Dilated Peoples and MF Doom on the label. You might be familiar with.
Yep.
So I learned a lot about business and entrepreneurial success through hip hop and that model in Minneapolis, and met a lot of my good friends just having a good time doing it. Now, as a second half of my 40s type character and a dad to a couple of young kids, my hip hop listening patterns have changed, but I still find hip hop as a great vehicle for music discovery because it's rooted in all the other genres that came before it. So through my longtime affiliation with hip hop, I'm studied in funk and soul and jazz and blues and now pretty much anything can be flipped into a hip hop record. You take a country thing and flip it Enya or whatever you want. And so I love that. And in my show nowadays, I'm more celebrating that more so than playing, just straight DJ Premier boom bap classics or whatever. I'm on the tip of trying to use hip hop as a conduit to learn about other forms of music, a wide variety of forms of music, which I would just define more loosely as soul music. And then also to use that as a catalyst to meet people of Northwest Arkansas. So not unlike your show, I've had a lot of rappers and hip hop folks on my show, but I've also had, former First Lady of Razorback basketball, Danielle Musselman, and I've had Graham Cobb on, who is known for his economic development efforts. And I've had a lot of people on the show who aren't necessarily hip hop, but our conversation about life here was viewed through the lens of hip hop. And then we played songs that were adjacent to the stories they were sharing with me. So it's really fun, kind of a fun interview show using hip hop as a different prompt.
Well, and I think that's important to do that because I think, hip hop is more prevalent than ever.
Yes.
And and it's so funny. It's the other day, one of my favorite jazz artists passed away, Roy Ayers.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that his one song of his, Everybody Loves the Sunshine, had been sampled more than 250 times. I mean, across eras of rap. And I thought that was interesting, but I think that speaks to the bigger question about creativity, and it rests wherever you are. And that's the thing that I like about hip hop. So I really appreciate the way that you've embraced hip hop and that you're using it and kind of creating an outlet and a platform for people to enjoy it and learn from.
And that's just my little hobby show. I did as a volunteer DJ, still continue to do. But at a larger point, the music program on KUAF, which you can find, we have classical music overnight, 4 or 5 nights a week on FM. On the weekend, we have some more formats. We have some very long-standing shows like Pick and Post and Shades of Jazz and all these great jazz and blues and other programs. Vinyl Hour is a great show we have.
Yeah.
A really cool show called Natural States where this guy Jay kind of takes field recordings and he plays, themed shows. They'll have a show all about water and all the songs have to do with water, but somehow it works. It's really cool. Very, very Arkansas. And then we have 2 HD channels that play all music content. One is all classical. It's HD2. And HD3 is mostly jazz with some other more contemporary.
I tune into it in my car all the time. So, yeah.
And so in each of those, we're trying to celebrate Ozarkian music. We're trying to celebrate American music. This isn't about so when I'm playing a hip hop show, it isn't about that being some other form. It is an acknowledgement that jazz, there's an argument that jazz is like a top 10 American invention of all things, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And musically, maybe number one.
Yeah.
Hip hop's right there, right? And so
it is.
to not have any hip hop on these airwaves would be a miss.
It would be.
But there's a lot of other forms of music, including a lot of stuff you associate with the region, that picker music, the Americana music, the country, and we really revel in that too. And while that might not be my preferred music genre, I absolutely love it too.
Sure.
And so I also, when I'm home with my family, not lying here, I promise, we just have it. We listen to the news shows on KUAF during the day when we're for cooking or doing something like that. And then we put on HD3 to listen to that more varied music style from my show on through the rest of the night.
Yeah, no, I love that. And yeah, I do too. I listen to that too. I sometimes just have the KUAF app open and I'll have it just streaming. And so that's another way that people can really take advantage of it. Because sometimes I hear, well, what station is it? And I'm like, well, you can just pull out your phone and get the KUAF app. And then that way you can listen to it. And it certainly gives you another way to access the. Yeah,
maybe a personal story here. This might be kind of weird, but so I have a 3-year-old and I have a 8-month-old. And, there's a big discussion in the world, prompted in a very healthy way by our governor, Sarah Sanders, about limiting cell phone access to children and how maybe being on the mobile device is not good for their brains or good for other things. One of my solutions to that is public radio. Because my daughter's favorite songs are Octopus's Garden by the Beatles and Give Peace a Chance by John Lennon and Yoko Ono. Those are her favorite songs. All right. Along with some kid songs. And if we lived in an on-demand world, which we are pressured to do, we would just listen to 4 or 5 songs over and over again until they're toast. We would be labeled by advertisers as, targeted based on whatever they learned about through the songs, and that would happen. But I like the serendipity of this digital radio experience that is delighting us with songs we wouldn't have otherwise known about, right? And so we heard my daughter, there was a pop artist, Latin pop artist named Rosalia, and not an artist I was previously familiar with, but she came on the radio and my daughter started dancing like it was the greatest thing ever. I was like, so I Shazammed it, found out what it was. Now we know my daughter likes Rosalia's, unique band of Latin pop dance music. All right. We would never have known that if we just stuck to our on-demand listening patterns. And she's only 3, so she's going to change her listens. And I want her to sample all the world that's ahead. And by the way, isn't that true for 46-year-olds too? Right?
Absolutely.
We just have to be baked into
and
something.
55-year-olds, yes.
You're right. And
you're
85-year-olds.
discovering something new all the time.
It's the only way to maintain some degree of youth and vigor is to continue to experience the feeling of new, right? And new feelings of connection. And so I view public radio and some other forms of media that are being challenged at the moment, including newspapers, as great vehicles for continued personal development and serendipitous discovery and togetherness and cohesion in communities.
Yeah.
And that word salad I just threw out, it's like all the things that I value. So my purchasing behaviors and what I donate to need to reflect those values, or else I'm full of it. Right.
Yeah.
And so my invitation is for other folks to think like, all right, it's cool that you've curated a whole thing that was tailored to a certain person you were at a certain time. How's that working out for you? Like,
Right.
do you feel happy? I don't know. Like, are you full of feelings of anxiety and wondering what's going to happen as someone is all of us are being told by someone that the world's crumbling around us.
Right.
How does that feel for you? So maybe choose some media that doesn't tell you that or tells you that in moderation, along with some healthier community-driven messages.
And communicate some hope too, right? I think it's important. So
we don't put our head in the sand either to whatever challenges, but we can boogie to some music, we can jam to Rosalia, and we can listen to jazz and classical. I sorry to beat this horse here with the story, but I was just dropping my daughter off this morning at her school. She's 3 again, and we have Sirius XM in our car. And shout out to Sirius XM. I like Sway Calloway. I'm a big fan. And she usually wants to hear this Moonbug radio. It's like it's a kid's station on Sirius XM. But it was still on KUAF HD2, the classical station, from the last time I was in the car.
Yeah.
And my daughter goes, "Oh, keep it here. I like this. And I was like, "Oh, I didn't know you like classical music."
Right.
And the next song came and she goes, "I don't like this one."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Okay." We went over to HD3 for a second, listened to some jazz. She goes, "Oh, okay." And I go, "Do you want to try the classical again?" And she goes, "Yeah, I like that better." And we go back. And I was like, "All right." So that's my daughter. It's one, I'm happy that she's making that discovery. And again, it's different than me kind of metaphorically shoving a song down her ear. It's like a nice form of discovery that can only happen through the magic that is radio.
Absolutely. I agree with that 100%. Man, you have laid it out for us today and actually given us a lot to think about. And I certainly want to encourage the listening audience for I Am Northwest Arkansas to get active and get involved with public radio, no matter where you are, but especially if you're right here in Northwest Arkansas, you've got KUAF right in your backyard. And these guys have had more than 40 years of showing up and making things happen. And we want to continue to support that so that, we can celebrate another 35 years of Ozarks at Large. And so maybe some of us won't be around then, but someone will be there to celebrate it, because there were people that were there at the beginning when Kyle started that aren't around anymore. But here we are celebrating 35 years of Ozarks at Large and that accomplishment. So I just want to encourage everybody listening to please get involved in any way that you can. I'm not necessarily asking that you have to give money, but again, you can give of your time, you can give of your talent. And if you have any ideas, what's the best way for people to reach out to you, Clint, and kind of share their thoughts about KUAF?
Yeah, I think email is a great way to start. Again, it's at my University of Arkansas email address, schaff@uark.edu, SCHAFF@uark.edu.
Yeah.
Also, you can find all of us are really accessible through KUAF.com/contact. We all have our email addresses, and nearly all of us have our phone numbers on there.
Right.
So hit us up. I'll do my best to respond to every inquiry and take it very seriously. And on the financial thing, literally, like if $1 a month would go a long way toward, because a lot of the community-oriented stuff, we're going to start with members. So the radio is always going to be the top way to respond to folks, but I don't want to dilute the radio product with a community notice about KUAF. I'd rather use that platform to promote the things that are happening in the community. We're not going to talk about ourselves that much.
Sure.
So if you want to opt into that conversation about KUAF being connective tissue for a growing and dynamic region, I need you to become a member, a contributing listener. Yeah. And it can be at a very small amount. That's all right. I'll add to that. There's some other way. We are not involved in this legislative lobbying effort, but NPR is encouraging folks to support a group called Protect My Public Media, which aspires to let legislators at the congressional level know about the values of public media. And so if that's something that interests you, or if you want to just be informed about that debate, that'd be a good place to check out.
Yeah, we'll put links to all of everything that Clint mentioned. We'll put links to all of that in the show notes. And so we will definitely share that information out. So.
Yeah, because there's some other benefits to public media that I think don't get recognized. When we talk about the programming, it's exciting to talk. I mean, to me, it's like we do news and music. That's what everyone knows. But the underlying current of all of it is the idea of community that I think we need to do a better job of telling that story. That's the story I'm here to tell today. And then there's some other benefits. We support the economy in a real way. There's a lot of our coverage is about supporting new businesses that launch, supporting nonprofits and their efforts to raise funds, promoting their galas and stuff like that. Like if that were to go away, all those organizations would feel the impact.
Yeah.
There's also a public radio safety component. We aired 75 emergency alerts last year. And in fiscal year 2024, we live in an area that experiences significant weather events. My basement flooded last May when this tornado came.
Mm-hmm.
And radio is one of the best places. TV is a good place to go. They have meteorologists on staff. We don't. But TVs lose electricity and radios do not. They are battery powered. And so your car you can still find out what's happening. So it's a really important part of what we do. And there are many parts of much of Arkansas is rural. And there are many folks who depend on this programming and this system of public radio for safety alerts.
Yeah.
And so we, if you may not like this or that about public radio and you should make your voice heard, we do not want to throw the, metaphorical baby out with the bathwater. There is a safety component here that cannot be erased.
Oh, yeah. And it can be the difference of life or death.
That's right.
Yeah. So I appreciate you sharing that. Clint, man, this has been a pleasure. And this was what I was actually hoping for when I originally invited you to come on. And that offer and standing is always going to be open to have you come and kind of share with us an update of how things are going here at KUAF and all the amazing things that you guys are doing. And again, just from my own personal perspective, the fact that you guys opened up your space to me to be able to share the stories and tell the stories that I think are important here in Northwest Arkansas, especially as it pertains to business, culture, entrepreneurship, and life. I really, really appreciate you guys, all of you and Kyle and the most amazing group of folks that are here at KUAF. And so I want to just personally thank you for all that you do and for what you continue to do. And I'm rooting for you, as I know so many others here in Northwest Arkansas are. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for being part of the family. I know your segments on Talks at Large are great radio and provide much needed perspectives. And we aspire to even have more community voices supported through KUAF. The forums may change and evolve over time, but we want to be more in that direction, not less. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree. Well, folks, that's another episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas. To learn more about us or to read or download the show notes from today's episode, visit IamNorthwestArkansas.com. You can listen to this podcast and sign up for our free newsletter to keep up with us and all things NWA. Please sign up today. You can subscribe to the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast wherever you listen to it. And please, please, please consider rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts. Remember, our podcast comes out every Monday, rain or shine. I'm your host, Randy Wilburn, and we'll see you back here next week for another new episode of the podcast. Peace.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas. Check us out each and every week, available anywhere that great podcasts can be found. For show notes or more information on becoming a guest, visit IamNorthwestArkansas.com. We'll see you next week on I Am Northwest Arkansas.